good morning. Happy Wednesday, PSW staff, clients, and friends. Join us for halfway through the week. So far, so good. I mean, the results are in for Sunset Boulevard. Terrific. Great job getting that kind of big score for that chase scene. Joe Gillis, quite a character. And interesting that, it starts off with voiceover from Joe Gillis, but he's dead. So it's like, what's that about? Already it's kind of a little bit weird. Because Hollywood's weird. Sunset Boulevard, it's a very dark story about Hollywood. And we talked a lot about that yesterday. Monday. Yesterday we talked about Beverly Hills Hotel and the glamour, right? And Paul Williams, genius of an architect, did sketches upside down, just crazy. And contributed so much to the glamour of that in the 1950s, because that goes back to 1912. So long ago. But by the 50s, everybody was loving Beverly Hills, shopping, movie stars, swimming in the pool, stars getting discovered, just glitz and glamour, when it must have been a lot of fun back then. So today we're going to look at a place where more music is focused on here, because yesterday was glamour. Tomorrow's going to be a little bit of glamour. Today will be a hotel, because this is our hotel themed week. So today we're going to look back at the Dunbar Hotel. This is Central Avenue. We're going to be talking today about the famous Central Avenue where all these great jazz clubs were from the 20s and 50s. And it was the hub of West Coast jazz. We think of jazz really, in particular, 40s, 50s, bebop. That was all New York. That was 52nd Street. But actually, we had a lot going over on the West Coast. In fact, people called it Little Harlem because it had so many similarities with clubs and musicians coming through. And in particular, we'll use the Dunbar Hotel as kind of our reference, because that was the main hub where people would stay. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some of the other jazz clubs. We're going to talk about the musicians. I'm so excited. We're going to have a good time. So let's talk about the Dunbar Hotel on Central Avenue. So the year is 1928. Okay, what's going on in 1928? This is when the hotel is built, and we'll talk about who built it and what in a second. But 1928. So this is after we talked about the Ambassador Hotel in the Coconut Grove. That was a few years earlier. So this is 28. So this is the time when penicillin's finally invented. Huge thing. We still use that for our medical needs. Also a time for women. Amelia Earhart is the first woman to fly across the Atlantic Ocean. And then Mickey Mouse. We get the Steamboat Willie, little mouse coming out. So Mickey Mouse is being developed. Medicine, huge develops in medicine and development in medicine. A huge thing for a female, flying Amelia Earhart's journey. That's huge. And culturally, we have the first thing by this guy named Walt Disney that's going to take over the world pretty soon. So that's what's going on. So in 1928, a very prominent black couple, they were Dr. John Somerville. He comes from Jamaica, moves to LA. First black guy to graduate from USC dental school. And his wife is also the first black woman to graduate from the dental school. So they're this power couple in the right before the 20s. They're rich, they're wealthy, they're politically involved with the city, and they both are also early proponents and a part of the NAACP. And what they discover, or John discovers, is that there's no hotel for black people that they can stay in that's luxurious. And the Ambassador Hotel was all lovely and great, but that's for white people. They couldn't. The black people would perform at the Coconut Grove, but they weren't allowed to stay there. They had to go to the Gaylord Hotel across the street, or they would come over here. And so his thing was that he wanted to create a luxurious hotel for black musicians traveling through, or for very successful black musicians that were from LA and that were playing there. So Hotel Somerville was, it it would attract Louis Armstrong, Ella Fitzgerald, Lena Horne, Billie Holiday, Langston Hughes, and Thurgood Marshall. So, and intellectuals, they would come and hang out in the lobby. And it was a very beautiful hotel. I mean, it was Art Deco lobby with a beautiful chandelier, Spanish tile windows. And when the Depression hit in the 30s, the Somerville, they kind of lost some of the power in it. So that's when it became the Dunbar Hotel, and the Dunbar, and then people would, black musicians. This was kind of in the 30s. So by the 40s, 50s, Central Avenue was just cooking with jazz musicians. Dexter Gordon, Eric Dolphy, and Charles Mingus, who we talked about. They were playing at all these jazz clubs. I mean, we think of 52nd Street in New York, as the really just the center for bebop and jazz, and it was. But we also had our little Harlem over here going on. Ray Charles and Count Basie would play at these little clubs, and they were packed. And so the Dunbar was kind of where they would stay a lot of times, and that was kind of this luxurious place. But these little clubs, Club Alabama, the Downbeat, Elks Hall. Downbeat was where Mickey Cohen would always hang out at. It's also where Charlie Parker played, and we did talk about Charlie Parker playing in Inglewood, a few miles away. So, we think of Charlie Parker as just a New York-based player, but people came out to L.A. People from New Orleans moved out to L.A. And not only transplants, but people that were born and raised here, because very close to here you had the great Jefferson High School. Jefferson High was, had an amazing music jazz program for high schoolers. I mean, it taught composition, theory, music appreciation, orchestra, band. This was in the 40s. They had great teachers that were teaching music. And people that graduated from there, from Jefferson High: Dexter Gordon, Art Farmer, Donald Cherry, people from the Platters, Etta James. A lot of great musicians just came out of Jefferson High. We had the Lincoln Theater, which a lot of people thought that it was the equivalent of the Apollo, the West Coast Apollo, that held over 2,000 seats. So you'd have Nat King Cole and Lionel Hampton, Sammy Davis Jr. performing there. And these were places and theaters that were all run by black people. And, in turn, white Hollywood celebrities, they'd come because they loved the music there. They would have, Humphrey Bogart, Marilyn Monroe, W.C. Fields, Bing Crosby. They loved coming, Howard Hughes. They loved coming out here to hear this great, wonderful music that was going on. So 40s, 50s, and early 60s, just the music was amazing. People coming through and just playing. And the Dunbar was this just great place to hang out, to watch music. So Central Avenue had all these great little clubs that were just wonderful. It kind of went away in the 60s. And this is for better or worse. This is a tough one, because with the abolishment of these segregation laws that were going on in the country and in Los Angeles, it allowed blacks to move into other parts of the city, which was great. But because of that, Central Avenue kind of became a little bit obsolete and a little bit run down, because there wasn't really people there enough to give it the care and love or support, which is, so they were kind of run down. So it was great that blacks were allowed to live in other places in the city, obviously, no doubt. But because of that, it was kind of neglected. But now it's a monument, and it's known as Dunbar Village over there. So it's lovely over there. They've fixed it up. It's a low-income apartment building for elderly tenants, but the city's worked hard to restore it, and they give it like $14 million renovation. So the jazz clubs aren't there anymore, obviously, and the hotel isn't functioning, but there's still some piece of history that's still there for us to see. And it's so cool that all this great music, this jazz music, was part of this Central Avenue, part of our history that, frankly, I didn't know about. I really didn't know anything about this. and it was so fun researching and looking it up. Thanks for watching. This is a good little LA tour trip of something that's not there, but I think there's memories that are still there of it, and obviously memories of the beautiful music that came out of there that we still listen to today. So built 1928. Hope you enjoyed that. I mean, that's when the hotel's built. First Somerville, right? But this is, I mean, it's really cool. We had Little Harlem, they called that. I mean, Central Avenue, which was like 52nd Street back then, and all those great jazz clubs. We had all of those, and we looked at, remember, I mean, not with this class, but we looked at Bronzeville, where all those jazz clubs, Charlie Parker, they played down, Little Tokyo, because of the internment camp. All the Japanese were, they went to concentration camps. They, not to be killed, but their whole life was uprooted. So a lot of blacks came into Little Tokyo, created a jazz, jazz world, cafes and all that stuff. But mostly, this is South LA. This is very close as we looked at to our school right now. But Little Harlem, how much fun was that? And like I mentioned all those people that had played there, but Mingus played there and Eric Dolphy. And this was also important because this was a place where black people could stay at the hotel. Because, like I said, we couldn't stay at the Ambassador because the Coconut Grove was a place that Duke Ellington, everybody, and a lot of them stayed at, across the street at the Gaylord, but a lot of blacks could perform here and also go back to the hotel there because it welcomed them. Also interesting to see Jefferson High, like that importance there in the 1940s. What a great music program Jefferson High had. I mean, to come out, we haven't talked about Dexter Gordon, but he's one of the greatest jazz saxophonists of all time. We haven't talked about Don Cherry, but one of the greatest jazz trumpet players of all time. And then, of course, we know Etta James. And so those guys came out of Jefferson High. And same with Bronzeville and also with Little Harlem. I mean, celebrities loved that kind of music. And we looked at the Tiffany Club in Koreatown, how Marilyn Monroe would come out there and befriend Ella Fitzgerald. People loved people love good music, right? And jazz is still good music, but especially jazz was so popular in the 40s and 50s, and it was kind of a cool thing to like. And it wasn't a fad because we listened to those jazz songs all the time. It wasn't something that it was, just kind of, cheap music. Maybe people thought of that because they were scared of it, but it was actually music that we still listen to. We still listen to Chet Baker. We still listen to Dave Brubeck, all these great artists. And then, unfortunately, in the 60s, blacks moved out, and again, fortunately, they were able to get land. So that's the good thing. The unfortunate part is that it went into decline. That whole Little Harlem and Dunbar was neglected. And so mostly it was just because nobody took care of it. And we've looked at other places, MacArthur Park, all these things that reach a pinnacle, and then it kind of, not so much with Beverly Hills Hotel. I don't think that ever went through a rough patch, but these are some of these stories in history that we've talked about. There's always kind of a sad ending. It doesn't always stay that way because, MacArthur Park's still there, and that was just an example. When tomorrow we'll talk about the Biltmore, and that actually kind of went through decline where it's like, okay, do we tear it down? Thank God they didn't, but at least now it's a monument there, the Dunbar, village, low income for the elderly, so that's good. So I really wanted to go back and look at the Dunbar Hotel and Central Avenue jazz scene, because when you think of where was the jazz scene in the 50s, most people would just say New York, and that's true, but also here, we had it here. It didn't last too long, but it was definitely thriving in Los Angeles, and this is our Los Angeles Hotel Week, so hope you're enjoying that. We're halfway through. Tomorrow we're going to look at a really important hotel, because this is Hotel Week, and we'll just have too much fun with that. So thanks for watching. Have a great rest of the day, and see you tomorrow. Okay, bye.